If you want to win a poker tournament, your best chance at doing so is by being aggressive. Why? Because players simply don't have a good hand that often, so they can fold and you'll take down the pot. And even if they do have a good hand, they can still decide to fold it. Even if it is rarely happening in poker theory. Especially in tournaments, you want to use your chips as ammunition to put ICM pressure on smaller stacks, and constantly gather a few more big blinds to keep your stack healthy and fight the always increasing blinds. The problem is, of course, that other good players know this as well, and won't make it as easy for you. And if they're really good, they'll watch you closely and take notes. And then they'll use your aggression against you. Ace-Queen off wouldn't be a cold 4-bet in this spot, but just a fold. So the fact that Ben also uses a hand that would be a fold according to the solver is a strong indication that he expects you to be wider than you should be. Still, he likely isn't doing this with any 2, but selects a hand that still does a good job blocking some of your most nutted hands, namely queens, kings and some ace-kings, which opens the door for him to also use the power of aggression. Chip leader against chip leader, Silouan completes the small blind and Ben checks behind. Silouan flops a pair and checks, which could also be bet to get value. Instead, Ben uses the chance to start betting his gut shot with a club. 4-8 has an easy call, and on the 10 on the turn, Ben can comfortably bet again. Interesting side note here, having a club here actually makes us bet less often, because a 5 or a 6 of clubs blocks more 5 and 6x offsuit hands in our opponent's range that would call the flop and fold the turn, than it would block flush draws that could call the turn. Silouan has another easy call, and on the river, if bet, the solver would mostly go for an overbet. Ben's hand would mostly give up, and Silouan's hand would mostly call. But, in reality, players deviate. So it's the player who deviates the right way who scoops the pot. Meanwhile, you try to fight back. But the tables have turned. Why isn't being aggressive working anymore? These small 3-bets are actually a thing against these smaller stacks, as they need to be extremely selective about the hands they are continuing, because ICM is such a big factor. So 3-betting small is a great way to be aggressive without risking too many chips. It also allows you to not be committed against a jam as often, which means you can very well 3-bet fold hands like offsuited ace and king x and take down the pot a lot of the time. Queen 9 off is also in there, so close enough. But when you start to mix in other hands into your 3-betting range, it is really easy to become unbalanced towards bluffs. And of course, great players will know their theory as well and or have picked up on your aggression and counter it by being even more aggressive. What if you wanted to improve in tournament poker, but instead of running endless amounts of sims with different stack sizes and ICM impacts, you could just jump into a learning session just like you would into a real poker session? That's what Parrot by Raise Your Edge allows you to do. By practicing spots that they have run for you, not only do you get instant feedback on your decisions and explanations why, but also hundreds of times the reps in that you would by playing only a few MTTs a week. All preflop simulations you see in this video are also available in Parrot's ICM tier to click through and practice yourself. And this one is even accessible to everyone. All you need to do is make a free Parrot account, which takes about 10 seconds, and you can access the sim. Despite just having been put into your place, you simply can't resist to be more aggressive than optimal. the small 3-bet would again be a thing. But choosing ace-5 off to do it is very much not. And you get punished again. Which painfully makes you realize that especially when throwing around chips a lot, you need to be prepared for phases where it seems like no matter what you do, you can't win a pot. So you change plans. You wait for a hand. You're back in the game. Now everything is possible. Let's default back to being aggressive. And for an aggressive player, what's better than attacking some capped ranges? After checking back the flop, Siluan should rarely or maybe even never have a 7 here. So betting the turn big with your 6 high flush draw is a great way to push out overcards that are still ahead of you. The raise is weird, but again, we ruled out a 7 and our own range is uncapped. This is exactly where we wanted to have him. Meanwhile, Ben is silently watching. I wonder what's going on in his mind when he sees this hand.
I was sitting there enjoying my life and just let the boys battle it out. That's the best thing that can happen for me in that situation under ICM pressure. Now, the plays didn't really make a lot of sense to me when I was already seeing the turn and the river, or especially the turn play, even not really knowing what they have. The big blind leading on the turn with that hand makes a lot of sense, very good. Now the button raising, I don't think he should have a raising range here. He checks back the flop. He has way less 7x than the big blind. And when you are in ICM prison, meaning the other stack covers you, and there's a board where you have the nut disadvantage, so the big blind has more 7x than you have. Having pocket queens on this board, it's not really that relevant, but the big blind has 7-4 off, he has 10-7 off, he has queen 7 off. Hands that you very likely don't open. Now, you don't really want to be raising into that range. And the big blind, of course, was aware of that fact. That's why you went all in. I don't really hate that play. I just don't think it's optimal. For the big blind, you probably want to 3-bet. If you have a king 7, a queen 7, an ace 7, even any kind of trips, and you think your opponent is raising with pocket jacks or queens, whatever, you don't want to go all in and maximize your fold equity because now he's just end up calling his boats and very strong 7x hands, right? Or he makes a hero call with an overpair. So I would assume that the button plays a strategy where he wants to freeze play. So he wants to raise, so just the draws call, maybe weaker pair calls. But the problem against someone like Romeo Pro, he can just go over the top and 3-bet you and turn hands into bluff or jam his draw, right? So it's not really good strategy to raise with a hand like pocket 9s and you have to fold. Better call and maybe hero call the river. Keep the pot small. Now, apparently he made on kind of an exploit here to induce a light jam or light 3-bet by the big blind, which worked out pretty well here. So well played, an exploitative play. Wouldn't really approve it in terms of theory. And from Romeo Pro's shoes, I would just 3-bet. He gives his bluffs a better price. It's already a lot of pressure, especially with ICM. The button already gets a worse price because of ICM. So very often in ICM, you can raise less. You don't need to go all in and you will still have the same amount of fold equity as you would have in chip EV situations. So weird hand, good for me. I would have definitely played it quite different though.
This is a disaster. A minute ago, you were reaching for the $200,000 first place prize, and now you're almost out in fourth. What a fall off. Is this the end? No. you're not done yet. Luckily, you still managed to ladder a spot. And even double up. And the poker gods have one more gift for you. And when an aggressive player is running well, he's running really well. Which somehow even lets you end up in the heads up, battling for more than 200k. And now, you're back doing what you do best, being aggressive. Very aggressive. We can see that 4-3 off would never be played against an open, let alone be 3-bet. So this is very much out of line. But you flop a pair and decide to check. This is actually the passive approach in a spot where the solver would be mostly aggressive and bet. You would get called by many weaker high cards, but also fold out some of them and deny their equity. Facing a big bet shouldn't be happening a lot in theory, but when it does happen, the solver would again go for the more aggressive line and raise often, which would get those overcards to fold that decided to stab and still have a lot of equity. Still, calling is fine, and we see a check back on the turn. Even though a lot of our opponent's hands should continue barreling. With a 3 on the river, the board looks quite scary now, but with bottom 2 pair, we're still able to make a value bet against single pair hands that would have checked behind the turn. In theory, this bet could be even bigger because 6x hands are unlikely to call pre-flop and or bet the flop for such a big sizing. But not so easy. Now, being aggressive doesn't help you. Instead, you need to estimate what your opponent is capable of. Not just in theory, but especially against real-life opponents, you not only want to consider which hands they could play this way on the river, but also which hands are less likely to even arrive here, because of how the hand was played on earlier streets. And here, the big bet on the flop might be more indicative of some random overcards that wanted to apply fold equity than a flush or straight draw, which could just bet small and have no problem calling a check raise. The question is, can he be aggressive enough to bluff here? Yes. If you like this format, then this next video will be exactly for you.